Ethan's eyes snapped open. Sunlight filtered through his curtains, dust motes dancing lazily in the golden beams. 16 today. His heart throbbed with a mixture of excitement and the ghostly ache of loss. He swung his legs over the bed's edge, feet finding the cold hardwood floor. Standing up, he stretched, muscles tight from yesterday's run through the woods. Shower water pelted his skin, washing away sleep. Steam fogged the mirror as he dried off, tracing the familiar path of his routine. A towel around his waist, Ethan approached his desk. There it sat, as always, the werewolf system. His fingers brushed the book's leather cover, worn from years of handling. The gold lettering still shimmered faintly, but the binding creaked like the branches outside his window. Parents' voices echoed in memory, soft, loving wisps that often filled his dreams. "Happy birthday," he whispered to their absence. Opening the book, Ethan sought comfort in the handwritten notes lining the margins. Then a paper cut, sharp and sudden. He hissed, pulling his finger back. A single drop of blood welled up, crimson against his pale skin. The book pulsed. Ethan blinked, once, twice. The warm light engulfed the tome, then it vanished, not a trace left on the desk. His breath caught, heart hammering. What just energy surged within him, wild and untamed. It raced through his veins, a torrent of power that demanded attention. His chest tightened, an invisible force squeezing with each beat of his heart. Eyes wide, Ethan felt the room spin. "Ground me," he thought. "Find your center." "Control," he gasped, reaching inward for the calm he fostered during his solitary treks in the forest. The pulse within him slowed, syncing with the rhythm of life outside his window, the chirp of birds, the rustle of leaves. "Adapt," he commanded himself, recalling his own resilience. The energy remained, coursing through him, but no longer a tempest. Now a river, powerful, directed. Survive. The word hung in the air, a mantra echoing through his mind. Ethan drew a deep breath, the surge of power now a steady thrum beneath his skin. He glanced at his finger, the cut already healing, flesh knitting together before his eyes. A knock at the door jolted him from his reverie. "Ethan, you up?" His roommate's voice, muffled by the wood. "Yeah, just a minute." He called back, voice steadier than he felt. He threw on clothes, movements quick and precise, a soldier preparing for battle. The door opened, revealing Jake's grinning face. "Happy birthday, man. Ready for today's." His voice trailed off, eyes widening as they met Ethan's. "Whoa, your eyes, they're... what?" Ethan turned to the mirror, a gasp escaping his lips. Brilliant green, flecked with gold, stared back at him. The eyes of a predator, of a wolf. "Wicked contacts, dude." Jake laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're gonna kill at the party tonight." "Right, contacts." Ethan forced a smile, heart racing. He needed answers, needed to understand what was happening to him. But first, he had to get through the day. Pretend everything was normal. The thumping bass of the party pulsed through Ethan's veins like an electric current, his senses heightened to an almost painful degree. His roommate, lost somewhere in the thrall of gyrating bodies and dim lights, had been his anchor when they'd first arrived. Now, Ethan felt the tether slip as predatory instincts, unbidden and unwelcome, began to claw their way to the surface. For a while, he managed to enjoy himself, laughing at jokes that weren't funny and nodding to conversations he barely heard over the cacophony. Then there was Gregory, standing too close, reeking of cheap cologne and desperation. Ethan could almost taste the bitterness emanating from him, could feel the territorial aggression radiating off his lean frame. "Look who thinks he can just show up and take what he wants," Gregory sneered, his voice slicing through the haze of noise, finding its intended target with precision. Ethan's eyes instinctively sought out Samantha across the room. Her laugh was a silver bell in the chaos, her smile bright enough to rival the strobe lights. The sight of her stirred something ancient within him, a claim that stretched beyond mere human desire. "Maybe you should crawl back to whatever hole you came from, mutt," Gregory taunted, unaware of how close he was dancing on the razor's edge of Ethan's control. A growl rumbled in Ethan's throat, low and menacing, a sound that didn't belong in a human throat. His fingers curled into fists, his nails digging crescents into his palms. The transformation was coming faster than usual, his body reacting to the moon that hung heavy and unseen above the roof of the house. "Back off, Greg," Ethan warned, his voice rough with the strain of holding back the beast. But Gregory, fueled by jealousy and alcohol, stepped closer, jabbing a finger into Ethan's chest. "Or what? You'll huff and puff and blow the house down?" That was all it took. A red haze descended upon Ethan's vision, and he launched at Gregory with a force that belied his human form. They crashed into a nearby table, sending plastic cups and bottles flying. Ethan's punches landed with the power of a freight train, every strike punctuated by the cracking of bones and the primal satisfaction that coursed through his veins. Around them, the party fell into chaos, screams mingling with shouts as people scrambled out of the path of destruction. No one dared to intervene, held back by the raw, animalistic fury that Ethan exuded. Unstoppable, unyielding. He was no longer just a boy at a party. He was a force of nature, a creature born of moonlight and shadow, driven by instincts as old as time itself. And as the realization of what he'd become settled over the room like a shroud, the only sound louder than the music was the beating of his own untamed heart. As he looked down, Ethan realized that Gregory was no longer moving. Panic surged within him as his breathing quickened. Ethan had always been a calm person, never allowing his emotions or anger to take control. But that night, his anger overwhelmed him. The police had been called, and now he found himself in a police car on his way to prison, charged with manslaughter. What a terrible birthday this had turned out to be, he thought. The cold metal cuffs bit into his wrists, a stark contrast to the heat still thrumming beneath his skin. Ethan stared out the window of the squad car, the world blurring past in streaks of light and shadow. His reflection stared back at him, those unnatural eyes, green and gold, glowing faintly in the darkness. The wolf inside him stirred, restless, as if it could sense the cage closing around them both. "Keep your head down," one of the officers muttered to the other, his voice low but not low enough for Ethan's sharp hearing to miss. "Kid's got something off about him. You saw what he did back there." Ethan clenched his jaw, the memory of Gregory's limp body flashing in his mind. He hadn't meant to. He hadn't even known he could. But that didn't change what had happened. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the guilt, the fear, the gnawing hunger that seemed to grow stronger with every passing second. The car jerked to a stop outside a nondescript building, its windows dark and uninviting. "Out," the officer barked, yanking open the door. Ethan stepped into the night air, his senses immediately assaulted by a dozen new smells: oil and asphalt, sweat and fear, something metallic and sharp. His stomach twisted. The wolf wasn't just stirring now, it was ravenous. They led him inside, through a maze of sterile hallways, until they reached a small interrogation room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their harsh glare making Ethan's head pound. He sat in the cold metal chair they offered, hands still cuffed in front of him. The door clicked shut behind the officers as they left him alone. Alone with his thoughts, alone with the wolf. He didn't have to wait long before the door opened again. A man stepped inside, older, with sharp features and piercing gray eyes that seemed to see right through Ethan. He carried himself like someone who knew exactly how much power he held. "Ethan Voss," the man said, sliding into the chair across from him. His voice was calm, but carried an edge that made Ethan's instincts scream danger. "I'm Agent Mercer. I think you and I have a lot to discuss." Ethan frowned, his guard going up immediately. "What do you want?" Mercer leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You killed a man tonight, Ethan. A normal person wouldn't have been able to do what you did. But you're not normal anymore, are you? No human can do what you did, although you do seem quite muscular." Suddenly, a man entered the room, his presence authoritative. He ordered the agent to leave, and the agent complied without hesitation. The man sat before Ethan and spoke. "Mr. Voss, I am Sebastian Rigel, a friend of your late parents. I can help you get out of here, and I will answer all your questions later." "What do you say?" "My parents? They died in an accident," Ethan said, confused by what the man had just told him. "That's what they told you, but I assure you, the incident was anything but accidental," Sebastian replied, his tone serious. Ethan didn't know what to think and sat silently for a moment. "My head hurts. I can't think straight," he muttered. "Take your time, but not too much," Sebastian said, smiling slightly. Ethan had to figure out what to do quickly. If what Sebastian said was true, he had nowhere else to turn. "Who are you really, And how can you help me? He asked, mustering up the courage to speak. As I said, I'm a friend of your parents, and I know what's happening to you. I can get you out of here and take you somewhere safe. But I need to know if you're ready to learn the truth, Sebastian said, his gaze intense. Despite being in handcuffs, Ethan shook Sebastian's hand. He had to find out what was going on. Sebastian stood up and whispered something into his ear. Remember, you're not a monster, and you can control what's happening to you, Sebastian said as he exited the room. Ethan sat there, his mind racing. The weight of what had transpired, Gregory's lifeless body, the police, the interrogation room, felt like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. But Sebastian's words stuck with him, replaying in his mind like a mantra. You're not a monster. The door creaked open, and Agent Mercer returned, his expression unreadable. Your lawyer's here, he said gruffly, motioning for Ethan to stand. Looks like you're getting out of here sooner than expected. Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding. This was it, his chance to escape this hell, to find answers. But as he rose to his feet, the wolf within him growled, a low, guttural sound that only he could hear. It was warning him, reminding him that nothing was as it seemed. He followed Mercer down the hallway, his senses on high alert. The walls felt like they were closing in, the fluorescent lights flickering ominously. When they reached the lobby, Ethan saw a man in a tailored suit waiting for him. Sebastian's doing, no doubt. Mr. Voss, the lawyer said, extending a hand. Let's get you out of here. The paperwork was a blur, the words meaningless as Ethan signed his name again and again. And then, just like that, he was free. The night air hit him like a slap, cold and biting. The lawyer handed him a card. Call this number when you're ready, he said before disappearing into the night. Ethan stood there, alone once more, the card clutched in his hand. The address on it was unfamiliar, but something about it felt right. Like it was the first step on a path he was always meant to walk. He started walking, his footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The city was quiet.